Well, good morning, friends. Good morning once again. Another episode of PB Reads the Bible. And today is episode number 38 on our journey through Genesis. And it is actually our last episode of our journey through Genesis, as we are going to be reading chapter 50 today, the last chapter in the book of Genesis. Um, so it's our last chapter through Genesis, and today is today is Friday, July 1st, 9 o'clock. Actually, I'm sorry, July 2nd at 9 o'clock. For me, it's Thursday, July 1st at just after 10 o'clock. Um, I only have half an hour, which should be plenty because it's this last chapter and not a whole lot to bring to your attention. Perhaps a couple of things as we go along, a couple of things to just point out or talk about. And real quick, just a reminder: next week, nothing. We will start on Monday, July 12th, with Romans and begin our journey through that. No idea how long it's going to take us to get through that one. So anyway, my friends, let's get to it, shall we? Again, not a whole lot to talk about. Worship, of course, on Sunday. So please tune in for worship. Either join us in person at 8:15 or 10:45. Join us here online, Facebook, YouTube, and the website for 10:45. For 10:45, and we will be having communion. So if you're joining us from home, please have some stuff ready. Cracker, bread, juice, wine, and if you've got kids, make a homemade megaphone for the children's message. All right, cool, wonderful. So chapter 50, here we go. Joseph threw himself. Pause. Pause. Just a reminder: Jacob just died. Jacob had just died. Remember, this is another one of those places where maybe they put the chapter break in the wrong spot. Okay, so Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body. So Jacob was embalmed. The embalming process took the usual 40 days. Very long time. And the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days. Pause. So, 40 days, a very long time. Remember, it's that 40, it's a very long time. 70 is a long time, yes, but 70 would be considered virtually a perfectly complete period of time. 7 is completion, and 10 is ideal or almost perfect, pretty close to perfect, one of those kind of things. So it's an ideally complete, a perfectly complete period of time. 7 times 10. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, "Please do me this favor and speak to Pharaoh on my behalf. Tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, 'Listen, I am about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself. So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I will return without delay.'" Pause. It's interesting, the author has Joseph going through an intermediary. It doesn't show that in the past. He's Pharaoh's right-hand man, the second in command. He's actually, according to the Pharaoh, according to the story, above all of those other people, or at least he was during the time of plenty and famine. Maybe in the succeeding years, however, since the completion of the perfect time of, the completed period of the full period of famine has come and gone. Perhaps now Joseph isn't quite as high up in ranking as he was. Maybe things have his shine has been diminished, or it's just a dramatic ploy to to build things and all that stuff. So anyway, he goes through these intermediaries, and this is kind of that fear that this actually speaks to that potential fear that Jacob had of why he made the other sons make the promise as well, because he was afraid Pharaoh wasn't going to let him leave, and so Joseph is making this appeal. Continuing, Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. Go and bury your father as he made you promise, he said. So Joseph went up to bury his father. Remember, direction doesn't mean necessarily north. It's going up to the land of Israel. He was accompanied by all of Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officials of Egypt. Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and their households. But they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. A great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. Pause. Now, the chariots, this is the interesting part, chariots and charioteers, this is turning this into quite the thing, because charioteers, these are weapons of war, really. Those are weapons of war. Don't think of Ben-Hur with the chariot races type thing, just something done for fun and challenge. A chariot was the M16, or the F-16, the F-16, the modern fighting jet. That's what the chariot was. We're probably beyond the 16 by now as well, right? But it's this. The chariot it's like a tank, comparatively speaking. It's the top of the line of a weapon of war. So they're turning this into a state funeral. They're turning this into a state funeral. This is showing the honor that Pharaoh, that Egypt holds for Jacob because of Jacob's son Joseph. Because of Jacob's son Joseph. And all of these people, everything, they're going along with them. We might think it's to make sure that Joseph comes back. That's not the point. The point is they all wanted to honor Jacob, and Pharaoh, I'm sure, provided for all this stuff, or that's understood in the story, even though it's not specifically mentioned. We can understand that he had to have given his approval to this all taking place. They're turning it into a state funeral. It's a big thing. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn memorial service with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. Remember, again, a complete period of time. Then they renamed that place, which is near the Jordan, Abel Mizraim, for they said, this is a place of deep mourning for these Egyptians. Because that Abel Mizraim means mourning of the Egyptians. It's interesting, all the people then, they named it that. They must have assumed, probably because of his dress and appearance and the fact that he was in chariots and all that, that Joseph and his brothers were Egyptian. They didn't recognize them as being, originally anyway, from Canaan. So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre. This is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. Pause. So that ends Jacob's story completely. He has died. He's been embalmed. He's been mourned. He's been buried. They return to Egypt. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him, they said. Pause. People who live their lives in deceit and wrongdoing have a tendency to see deceit and wrongdoing everywhere and to fear it everywhere. So they know that what they did to Joseph was wrong. They know that they treated him wrong. They expect him to be the kind of person that they are. So but they didn't want to go to Joseph directly, right? So here we go, verse 16. So they sent this message to Joseph. Pause. With a lie. Continue. Before your father died, He instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. But Joseph replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. Pause. So Joseph is saying, don't be afraid of me. He said, I'm not going to punish you. He said, am I God? I can't do that. I can't do that. And he says, and that word intended can cause some misunderstandings. When you read commentaries on this passage, they clear things up. So it's important because when we hear the word intended, it makes it sound like God ordained, that God wanted the brothers. It says what you intended to harm for harm, God intended to good. A better way to understand that second intended in particular is God used for good. God used for good. That ties in very, very well, very quickly, very clearly with from Romans chapter 8:28, where Paul writes and says, or we're going to be getting to that in 2 or 3 or I don't know 4 months before we get to chapter 8. Who knows? Where Paul very clearly says God can use all things for good. Okay, it's not in other words, that God can force good out of evil. So although they intended it for harm, God forced good out of it. What kind of good? To save lives. In this particular case, to save lives, to provide for a remnant to remain, for the opportunity for this family that has a special relationship with God to continue into the future. Okay. So he reassures them. Wrapping things up. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Pause. The Hebrew, and maybe some of your translations, literally says born on his knees. Born on his knees. So they, literally had the woman sit on his lap to give birth to the children, so that they were born on his knees. And in so doing, socially, they became his kids rather than Machir's kids. Remember, Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons. We might say still are technically, but Jacob had basically adopted them, taken them as his sons, added to his sons. And he said, and any other sons you have will be yours. Well, he's claiming these 2 sons from his grandson to be his son. And we don't know why. It doesn't say, the author doesn't say whether or not Joseph had other sons. If we assume, never a good thing, right? That since the author doesn't say it, that he didn't have other sons, he's taking these as his sons in order for what? Yes, to continue his life beyond this life, to keep, as a way to keep his name. It's a way to keep his name. Continuing, soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. End of chapter. End of book. So, a lot of times people, when you read Genesis, if you start at Genesis and work your way through, when you get to that line from Joseph about when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. It sounds as if it's a prediction for the enslavement of these people, of this family, of all of the Hebrews, which really means lower class, poor folks. But when we remember that this is post-Exodus being written, it's not a prediction. It's written kind of as a prediction, but he's actually referring to something that's already happened, so to speak. And even if you don't read it that way, if you read Genesis as having been, that it was written down at the time that it happened, it wasn't. But if you want to read it that way, when you get to that line, he doesn't say anything about enslavement. He could be just talking about next year, when things are better, or as soon as everything is done, you guys are ready to move back. God takes you there. Take my bones with you. But it's being written as a prequel, and so the author is setting the stage for the story of the Exodus. Well, my friends, that is it for not only for today, but for the book of Genesis. And that's it for this week. Probably should have said that before. That's it for Exodus. That's it for PB Reads the Bible for now. Okay, until July 12th. And we'll probably put some reminders. We will put some reminders in the announcements for the next couple of weeks, and probably a statement here on Facebook once or twice, just as a reminder, setting that up for that first day back, July 12th, as we begin our look at Romans. Okay, we'll look at the book of Romans at that point. So, my friends, I do pray that this has been beneficial. Thank you so much for spending time with me over the last 38 days of reading. And I pray it's been beneficial. I pray you learned something, that God has spoken to you in some way, and keep your eyes and ears open, physical and spiritual, to what God's doing in your life. When you see it, say, thank you, God, and then tell somebody about it. I'm waiting to hear, people. I'm waiting to hear. Tell me about your God winks. Until we meet again, be blessed, my friends.